What happens to your brain when you stop doing an activity? When you take a pause in some pastimes that you have been doing regularly for a number of months or years, let's say playing an instrument or playing a sport, playing soccer or golf, or doing yoga or meditation. When you stop doing those activities, what happens in your brain? What's the impact in your brain? Let's say you stop doing something for 2 or 3 months. Do you just go back to the way it was before and your brain is unchanged? What you're really looking at here is the competitive nature of brain plasticity, basically the use it or lose it concept. When you stop doing something, your brain changes. The map that you use and that you have built up for specific skills actually changes when you stop using that brain map. The concept of brain plasticity kicks in, and the brain map that you had used and built up starts to change. This video looks at what that change looks like, why it's in existence, and how you can ensure that that brain map that you have worked so hard to build up over the years remains untouched by other parts of the brain that are just eager and looking to take over any space they can. Your brain is a competitive place. You need to ensure that what you want to keep in there is kept safe and secure.
So, we're talking about brain plasticity here, and specifically competitive plasticity. And we're trying to understand how our brain works in terms of the habits and skills that we've built up, perhaps over a lifetime. So, when you develop skills over a period of time, you essentially develop a brain map space within your brain, and the continued usage of that brain map space applied against the specific skills that you've learned ensure that the brain map space is kept intact. With competitive plasticity in the brain, if you were to stop a particular skill, let's say it was learning the guitar or learning a foreign language, let's say French, or doing math, as soon as you stop practicing those skills on an ongoing basis, that brain map that you have developed over time will come under pressure from other brain map space in your brain. As you start to focus on other activities, the brain map space that you have developed will come under attack, essentially, within your brain. The competitive nature of brain plasticity or competitive plasticity means that if a brain map is not being used, then what you're actually doing instead of using it will start to reach out and take over additional space. If you think about it this way, learning a language, a second language as a child is much easier than learning a language, a second language as an adult. Why is there a limitation with adults learning a second language versus a child learning a second language? One of the reasons for this is that when a child is learning a second language, it is within a critical period, the critical period for language learning. And it's been shown by Merzenich when he was looking at this that the competitive plasticity doesn't really apply during the critical period of childhood when a child is exposed to two different languages. Essentially, you have one large brain map space that essentially is used for the two languages, and all the sounds of both languages are kept within that large brain map. There is no competitive plasticity existing during the critical period. However, as an adult, what you have happening is that the native language that you have learned as a child and as a teenager has already taken over all the linguistic map space. The challenge then is when you're learning a second language is to start to pull some of this linguistic map space into the new language that you're trying to learn. This is why it's so difficult to break or unlearn a bad habit. Most people think of the brain in terms of a vessel that will be filled by whatever learning you're doing. But as we've seen before, when you're actually learning something, what's happening is a container is not being filled as such, but brain maps are being developed. And when a brain map is developed with a bad habit, over time that brain map becomes stronger and stronger and gets larger and larger. And when you try to come and start a new habit or break the old habit, it's actually very difficult. What you're trying to do with a bad habit is unlearn it. What you're trying to do with a bad habit is change the brain map space that it has taken over. For sure, slowly as you stop doing that bad habit, that brain map space will start to shrink, but it is still there and it is still very strong. It just doesn't disappear because you have decided that you're no longer going to engage in that bad habit. Engaging in a new habit will slowly over time take over the brain map space that the bad habit has. But it's going to take some time, and this is why it's so difficult to essentially unlearn or break that bad habit. So Merzenich showed through his experiments that brain plasticity was competitive, and that plasticity itself was a process, and that this process was in constant motion, and that essentially what you focused on influenced that process to degrees depending on how intense that focus was. So brain maps he showed are dynamic, and there is competition for cortical space, cortical real space in the brain, and that brain resources are allocated on the principle of use it or lose it. So think about that for a moment, that brain plasticity is a process and that brain resources are allocated on the principle of use it or lose it. So as you go through your day to day and focus on certain habits, pastimes in your life, as soon as you stop focusing on them, as soon as you stop learning an instrument, as soon as you stop learning a language, as soon as you stop playing a sport, as soon as you stop something, the brain map that was associated with that activity is essentially under threat from changing in a way that diminishes your ability to essentially carry out or execute against those skills that you have built up over a period of days, weeks, months, years. And what you start to focus on will start to encroach. Competitive plasticity starts to kick in. So what does that mean if you're starting something new? If you're starting a new habit or a new language, a new pastime, you have to essentially develop a brain map for that. And that brain map that you're going to start to develop is essentially going to be competing with other brain maps for space. But the more you focus on that, the more you put your attention on that new learning, the bigger that brain map is going to be, the more it's going to grow, the more it's going to encroach and essentially take over from other brain map space. And that process is going to happen every time you put a focus on that new activity. That brain plasticity process and the competitive nature of brain map space is going to happen every day. So the question you need to understand, and this is really important when it comes to starting out in a new activity, it takes time to develop this new brain map space. It takes time for that brain map to become developed, and it takes time for old habits to break or to unlearn old habits. This process was first proposed by Donald O'Hebb, a Canadian behavioral psychologist, in 1949. And what he saw was he proposed that when two neurons fire at the same time repeatedly, or when one fires causing another to fire, chemical changes occur in both, so that the two tend to connect more strongly. Hebb's concept, actually proposed by Freud 60 years earlier, was neatly summarized by the neuroscientist Carl Schatz. Neurons that fire together wire together. Now, you would have definitely heard that saying from other people, for sure on YouTube, about the importance of that statement. But now you understand why that is so important. What is essentially happening is that new brain map is being developed. And as you develop that new skill, put a focus on that new skill, new neurons are firing and new neurons are wiring together. So you're developing that connection, you're developing that strength, you're developing that skill, but it takes time. And you've always got to remember when it comes to whatever skill you're learning or you're trying to learn, or that perhaps you think you've optimized and you've learned all you can, as soon as you stop doing it, what's in danger of happening is that the skill that you have developed over time is in danger of starting to recede pretty much straight away, because brain plasticity is happening every day and brain maps are changing every day. As soon as you start to put a focus on something else, the brain map space is changing. So if you want to, like, if you're thinking about mastery around a particular subject, the focus really needs to be there every day. The important thing that Merzenich showed was that brain plasticity exists, that it is a process, and that if you want to continue to be an expert or to develop expertise in a particular space, if you don't continue to focus on it and continue to learn in that space, the brain map space that you have developed will start receding. The neurons that you have developed over time and that have wired together and are firing together, they will become uncoupled essentially, and that your skill and expertise in this particular area will start to fade away. The neurons that you have developed over time and that have wired and are fired together will start to essentially work against you. So, in any area of your life, if you're wondering and thinking about, sure, I'll give it a week off, a month off, I'm just going to get time out, I know all I know in this area, I'm not going to learn any more, which is fine, but be under no illusion that as soon as you start to do that, as soon as you start to focus on something else, as soon as your attention starts to wane, then your skill at that is going to start to recede. And if you come back to it a month later, it is going to take time to get back to where you were. You're going to have to develop that brain map space all over again. Okay, so it's great that you're learning a new skill for sure, whatever it may be. But remember two things. One is it's going to take time to develop a brain map space. And if you're an expert or well versed in a particular subject and you're just taking a break and time out from it, you've got to accept that you're not going to be the same expert if you come back to it in a month's time, in 6 months' time, in a year's time. Your brain has changed and something else has moved in. Competitive brain plasticity is always there, but you are in control of it. And it's always important to know that. So that's it today from 5 Minute Brain Hacks. I hope you found the video interesting. The whole area around brain plasticity and competitive plasticity and it being a process is a fascinating area that we'll continue to explore. If you want to learn more about this and essentially how to get better at learning and understanding how the brain works, understand human potential, and how to maximize that for you. If you want to learn more about that, subscribe to the channel. If you found this video interesting, please like it and leave a comment. Thank you.